have
This
that very
conference will
reaction.
now be recorded.
So, did you guys hear that? No?
No,
Okay.
the recording came on. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great. Yeah. So, yeah. So that I, all of my siblings, most of them actually live in Massachusetts. Um, so it's kind of different being here in Texas. But anyway, I started this management consulting company back in 2018, and the focus is leadership development, management training, faith-based training, and also executive coaching. Most of my clients are in Massachusetts, um, but I provide services remotely and really anywhere where it's needed. The guest we have today is my friend Tamika Jacques, who is the COO of Fruitville Vision Enterprises. And the slides are a little slow, so if there's any issue, just let me know. But she has 20 years of workforce development experience. She's a doctor, and she earned her doctorate from Johnson and Wales University, a master's from Northeastern University, and a BS from Suffolk University. That's not a lot. Brilliant, brilliant woman, just really kind.
Thank you. You're
And,
so kind.
the two of us were on a panel together a few years ago during a conference, and that's how we met. So, Tamika, you want to share anything?
Well, since you shared a fun fact, and I would only be one of one, so I wouldn't be 3 of 10, I'd be one of one. But as we have discussed, as you can see in this picture, something that I've faced probably all my life actually is when people see me. If you look at this picture closely, you'll see that I have blue eyes. So that's just a fun fact. And both my parents are African American, so you know what the next question usually is. But that's the fun fact about me.
Wow. Yeah.
Neat.
I remember meeting you for was it lunch?
Yeah.
And I think I was staring at your face for a while, so forgive me. Um, but so Tamika wrote this wonderful book about employment and networking. It is #1 on Amazon under
It
the
was
category.
not right now, but yeah,
Well,
when it came out.
well,
Thanks.
it's a distinction that's worth mentioning that at one
Right.
point still #1 in new
Yeah.
releases under vocational education. So, you want to share a little bit about the book?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm going to go over this on some of the slides on the networking tips, but I wrote the book from just being in workforce, for the past 20 years, and also just my own experiences on how that I've had to develop my own networks, and knowing the importance of networking and what it really can provide you if you really do get into, whether it's joining professional development organizations and just being able to call on your network when necessary. So, I wrote this book from a place of really not so much within my own career, not being promoted the way I thought I should be promoted, and just being able to use my network more and really tapping into that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think we should probably have at one point another session on not being promoted or being recognized as people of
Yes,
color.
yes, yes.
Um, but that's for another day.
Yep.
But for today, we'll cover how to define your job search strategy. We'll also talk about how to create or update your resume in line with the strategy. And when it comes to defining the strategy and connecting that strategy with what you put on your resume, I'll talk about really conducting an assessment, taking this time, this downtime, really for a lot of people to say, where was I? Where am I now? Where do I want to go? Um, and then we'll also talk about leveraging your network. And Tamika will share some of her best practices. And she shared some of those with me while we were practicing for this. And I was just like, wow, I should have done that a long time ago. And then we'll talk about how to prepare for remote interviews and onboarding process, because some regulations have been relaxed around identification and providing that. So that helps to move the process along for a lot of companies that can do this. Um, so let's start with defining a job search strategy. So, for me, I've been working for a long time. And every time I leave a job or move on to another job, I take the time to really conduct an assessment of where I am. Um, and that assessment is, what did I learn from this last job, right? What do I want to continue to do? Because sometimes I realize from that opportunity that there are things that I've done that I want to continue to do, and then there are things I just never want to do again. And so I've learned to just take that time to make that assessment. And I've actually made a departure from uh, practice, because I actually started off doing family law, not employment law, right? And while I was helping a lot of families, it was physically very draining on me. And so I decided, okay, this is not where I want to go. Let's think about this HR background. I went to law school because I wanted to do employment law. Let's look at opportunities there. And I drafted my resume in line with that. And then so I drafted my resume in line with that. And I pulled from really my work experience in HR. And I was part of the Boston Bar Association, had like a session for new attorneys. And I remember this gentleman from a staffing company was joining us, and he literally identified me. He highlighted my resume among, like, I don't know, 25 or 30 people who were in the room. And he said, Jesse, whoever you are, I'd like to speak to you afterwards. And he said, your background in HR and the fact that you've done coursework in employment law, you should really think about executive HR roles instead of, trying to climb the ladder. You're already at the top. And so just making those changes, looking at your background, looking at your experience, coupling that with your education and what you're doing now can really position you for a fast track or a different opportunity that might fit you. Any thoughts there, Tamika?
No, I mean, I think that's a good point, right? I think that a lot of times we understate ourselves. And I'll talk a little bit about this in networking, but it's important that you're able to show yourself the best that you can, but be able to speak about yourself. And a lot of times your first chance without someone seeing, who you are is that resume. So you need to be able to speak about it the best you can, and really to, speak highly of yourself when doing that.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that we talk about in terms of the job search strategy, again, this is downtime for a lot of folks, or if you're working from home, you can view webinars and go to YouTube and do different things just to learn a different skill. For instance, I saw on social media, I follow Steve Harvey because I think he's just really funny. But he posted on his social media page that Microsoft is offering an Excel training program. Was in the thousands of dollars, but they've reduced it to $34. And I think they recognize that so many people are unemployed, and they're looking to not just hone in on the skills that they have, but to upskill, meaning to really upgrade their skill, or identify or develop a new skill. And so this is a great opportunity to do that. LinkedIn, if you have and Tamika, correct me if I'm wrong. LinkedIn, if you have a premium account, and I have one, they have LinkedIn Learn,
Learning,
and
yeah, LinkedIn Learning.
yeah, LinkedIn Learning, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So they have a lot of trainings or workshops or whatever they call them. And I've done a few of them. They're really, really good. And for however much we pay a month, which is 30 something dollars, you have thousands of
Mhm.
options. It's a great way to just upskill and learn something different. Um, and then education, again, sometimes I think, because we have education in a particular area, that's exactly what we need to do. I was a political studies and French double major in college, and yeah, I worked in state government for almost 10 years, and so there was alignment there. But before I went to state government, I worked in banking, the banking industry, for a number of big financial institutions, and so the important thing is we're all highly educated, so the the chance that we're going to make a departure from from what we're doing now is slight. So because of the audience, I won't dig deeper into this particular topic. And then the current job market. And this is really important because the job market has shifted a lot because of the pandemic. A lot of industries are hard hit. So you have retail industry is hard hit, the restaurant industry, the travel industry are hard hit, um, and they're continuing to lay off. I understand that TripAdvisor just made an announcement that they're laying off hundreds of employees. Do you remember how much?
It's about 600, 25% of their workforce. They're closing the Boston office downtown near South Station, as well as the office in San Francisco. So,
Wow.
yeah.
And that's just so sad for all of those families. But it tells us as if we're in the job market to really make a pivot because these are industries that are not hiring, but there are industries that are still hiring. So Amazon is really considered a tech company, but Amazon is hiring a lot because a
Hmm.
lot of people are still working from home. They're still under shelter in place. And they're not just hiring for warehouse or
Right.
in-store support, they're hiring at the highest levels. They just need support across the board. So, Eunice, maybe that's an area or a company that you might want to look at. Another place that is hiring, again, thinking about what's happening, where the shift is in the job market, is the Small Business Administration. And I've actually reached out to them because my business is hard hit by this, and so I'm like looking for different ways to bring in income. But the Small Business Administration is hiring attorneys to help process all of the loans, the millions of loans that they haven't really gotten to yet, applications, I mean. And so that's another area that you might want to consider. But look where the jobs are not, or where there's been a shift, or industries that are deeply impacted, and think about the industries that still have to provide the essentials to people, utilities, tech, um, hospitals, healthcare. Definitely, they're really in need of a lot of support. Tamika, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. That, there is some jobs that, some industries that are laying off, and then there's other industries that are just starving for people.
Mm,
So, you know, it's just important that we're following the trends. And if, there is a current industry that we might want to join in the future, like you said, get that stackable credential now. Maybe you can't join at this moment, but get the credential while someone is sitting home, learning how to study whatever the industry is, and then be ready. So when the industry is hiring again, you're not saying, oh, I wish I had taken that, that certification or that stackable credential, whatever it was during the pandemic, and I didn't. Now I have to do it now. So
mhm.
I think that this is the pandemic is a time when we prepare for, future opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that. Can you share a little bit more about preparing for future opportunities? I think.
Sure. Well, yeah, absolutely. Last week, just I did a live with a real estate agent. And we just talked about how, there are several layoffs. What people don't realize is that the real estate market is still moving, right? And so, people still have to get out of a house or apartment or whatever it is, and they're selling. And so I interviewed her, and she was saying, all it takes to join the real estate industry is to be 18 and have a social security number, but also the person that I spoke with, she's an award-winning real estate agent, and she's only been in for 3 years, but she took her course through Groupon. So we're talking about someone that took a Groupon course for $40 and then joined a brokerage, a real estate brokerage, and became Rookie of the Year in 2018. And then in 2019, doubled her sales. So, when you think about it, she didn't have to go to college. The course was 40 hours. She did it in a week, and
Mm,
she got it off Groupon, became Rookie of the Year, then doubled her sales, then doesn't have to pay the brokerage anymore commission fee because she hit her mark. I mean, that's amazing, right? So that's just how you prepare during this pandemic. You find that stackable credential, work on it now so that when things are kind of, get up and moving, you can just, roll with it. Like, let's go, I'm ready,
mhm.
and she did that on her own. You know what I mean? It wasn't like someone was, okay, do this way. She just studied, researched, and did that on her own. So in 2020 is still looking pretty bright for her, even during this pandemic. I follow her on social media. She's still selling homes. So
Wow. And
yeah.
yeah, some other attorneys I know who are in the real estate market, they're showing homes virtually. They're doing a lot of things virtually. So it's just a matter of perspective, really.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, the other thing we kind of touched on was creating and updating your resume in line with the strategy. So again, depending on what's happening in the job market, your background, your experience, where you want to go after doing that assessment, the resume should really reflect that. So if I don't want to get stuck in a particular job or certain types of jobs, I really need to make sure that my resume is tailored to where I want to go, but that my experience speaks to, my ability to do those types of jobs, or the capacity or potential to be able to do that based on education and different projects and maybe certifications that I have that speak to my ability to move into a particular role or particular industry. The other thing I would speak to here is that just make sure that when you're speaking and working within your network, and we'll talk about that at length, that you're asking about the different industries and what's happening there. And I won't go into more detail there because we're going to touch on it, but it's really important to get intel, so maybe the buzzwords and what kind of skills certain industries are looking for, certain companies are looking for, so your resume reflects that. Um, and then with do's and don'ts, everyone knows this. Make sure that your resume, that you have someone to review your resume, because you don't want to have any grammatical errors or punctuation issues or stylistic issues, things that would distract the person reviewing the resume. Now, having been in HR for an extended period of time, and I we in my last organization, we actually moved to applicant tracking system. So a lot of systems are really developed to identify certain words, and that's where you want to definitely tailor your resume to the position that you're applying for, because they're looking for certain words. And then they're what they're called asset questions, right? Asset questions basically determine whether or not you qualify and at what level you qualify for the position. So if you're the highest level, meaning you fit the description more than your competition, then you rise up. You're a preferred candidate in the pool. But just make sure again that the resume is tailored to the position and that someone is reviewing your resume so that there are no grammatical errors. It's not, and sometimes resumes I've seen they're just too full of detail. You know, when I was reviewing resumes manually, and sometimes we still have to review resumes manually because it's either a CEO position or COO. I did most of the C-suite positions whenever I had to support recruitment. Um, so, some resumes were just too long. They were way too detailed. Um, they say the average recruiter is going to look at your resume maybe 3 to 5 seconds, um, and and put it aside if they're not interested. After that 3 to 5 seconds, if they are interested, they'll read a little bit more. And so at the top of your resume should be words, descriptions that really catch the recruiter's attention, so that they don't just put it away. And if there are distractions, it's just not going to move forward. And we already talked about tailoring the resume to a position. So Tamika, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you summed it up perfectly. I think
Mhm.
that, it's just important, to follow the do's and don'ts. And like you said, and always have some sort of resume ready.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I, I always talk about this in networking that, as you're networking and you just meet someone, off the cuff and, they say to you, oh, great. Like, I see that you're looking for a job.
Mhm.
And, and then there's nothing worse when the person says, oh my gosh, I haven't worked on my resume yet. And it's like, I'm not asking you to have a tailored resume. I'm just asking for one resume that you might have so I can kind of refer you quick. Because a lot of times, word of mouth, they're looking for someone quick. So I just think it's important that this, what you've recommendations, what you said is followed, but also that, you have something ready to go and not have someone to wait for you to get your resume together if you're looking for a job.
Yeah. And speaking of that, let's talk about how you can leverage your network
Right.
in this
Yeah.
job search. Hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, I like to look at it as, what's the definition, of a network, right? Because a lot of people will say, well, it's just like having family. And don't get me wrong, yes, it is like having family, but with networking, it really is an established professional relationship, right? So it's really done strategically, it's done on purpose, it's done intended. And I know that people look at the word nepotism in a bad way, but
Hmm.
really when, the value of the network is where nepotism comes in, because if we have established, a relationship and I've seen, your accomplishments, or we've talked, or, we've met, that is really how that's establishing the professional side of it, but it's also a little bit of nepotism, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm going to recommend you for a job, or I'm going to refer you on to someone. And so a lot of times we think of nepotism looked at as in a bad light. And yes, it is sometimes, it can be in a bad light, but it also can be in a great light if you know the value of your network and really know how to establish the connection to people that are in your industry and people that are outside of your industry, right?
Hmm.
Because your network should be diverse. It shouldn't be, I know, Jesse, you've been in HR, your network shouldn't just be in HR. I've been in workforce development. I don't want to just have people in workforce development. I want to make sure that there's doctors, lawyers in my network,
Hmm.
nurses, janitors in my network. I want to make sure that my network is covered, whether it's the C-suite team or the entry level people. I want to make sure that my network is really covered, and that I can use my own version of nepotism. If I need, to call on somebody for help, then I can
Hmm.
do that. So really that's the importance of, just having a network and really gaining a pulse on the industry and the trends. So you can talk to people, in different various industries and really get a pulse and understand the trends of what's happening.
Hmm.
And that's really the value, the diversity of the value. And then really, when we talk about, how to network, there's different ways, but the first one I'll start with is just networking when you're at, an event, right? So, in my book, I give some tips on how to do this because, depending on how you are, if you're a high introvert, depending on the career test you've taken, if you're a high introvert or low introvert or a high extrovert or a low extrovert, there's certain things that you can do. So let's just say that you're an introvert and you arrive to this event and you're pretty shy, you don't want to talk to anybody, but you have to sit down and listen to a panel, right? And you're trying to find a place to sit. I always advise people, if you're an introvert, I don't want you to sit in the first row, I don't want you to sit in the last row. What I want you to do is sit in the middle row. That way there's people in front of you, there's people in back of you, there's people on the right of you, there's people on the left of you, and someone's probably going to say hi, right?
Yeah.
Or you can say hi to them, vice versa, but usually people have on a name tag, and that's just an easy way, if you're nervous, to kind of start that conversation, with somebody. So I think that it's important that things like, when you're attending events, to be strategic about it and arrive early. Put your phone in your pocket. I mean, have you been to an event where you've seen people, it's a networking event and they've labeled it, and as soon as someone walks in the door, this is all they do on their phone? I mean, you have to look approachable. You know what I mean? And if you're just on your phone, that's not approachable because you can't see me if I put my hand up here. So you want to make sure that when you arrive early, that you are looking approachable, you have a smile on your face, and that you're, not just networking with the same type of people that look like you. I think, it's easy sometimes to go to the first person that looks like you, but I encourage people, that are listening to this to, try to find someone that does not look like you. Right. And so that's really how you can network, being at an event, and networking online, it's a little different. Not so much that it's different, but you can go through, say if you're using like a LinkedIn, you can go through on a LinkedIn and, I think especially during this pandemic when people might have a little bit more time on their hands, you can just write a simple email to someone saying, hi, I see you have this type of experience. Can we do a phone chat? In the past, I might have said, can we meet for coffee? But right now we can't, depending on what state you're in. But can we
Even
do a phone?
now, even now, I need for coffee. Okay.
Okay. So depending on where you are, or you can just get a friend, if you're an introvert and you really don't know where to start, find a friend that can refer you. Can you send an email on behalf of me introducing someone? Because sometimes it's hard just to want to start an email. And so I think when that happens, it's just important that you are able to follow up with them, send a thank you email, and then write an email to yourself of where you met them, how you met them. That way, if you don't talk to them for the next year, you can go back and say, hi Jesse, I met you at the Association of Law Professionals, on this day, and we had this conversation, and people will be like, wow, she remembers that, and it kind of starts coming to their memory. So that's really how, that's just a tip on how to network online. I'll let Jesse, before I move on, but do you have anything you want to add to any of those kind of quick
So
tips?
I think that's great. I honestly I learned how to network through my mentors, and I am really actually I grew up very shy. And so I wouldn't even want to go to I grew up in the inner cities. I wouldn't even want to go to the corner store by myself. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, I mean, it was like a 5 minute walk. I just didn't want to be, I had an issue with people just looking at me. And so I found networking events very intimidating. Um, But over time, I just went to a lot of conferences, and my mentors really challenged me to network a little bit more. And I was at this one conference. It was actually the Massachusetts Women's Conference, the annual
Yes.
conference we do, which was, oh God, I love that. But is it Tori Roberts? I'm using the wrong name, but it's a woman who's she's
Tory,
not a
Tory
reporter.
Burch. Oh,
Yes, it's her or someone else. Stephanie, thank you for joining us. But I can't remember. I think it might be her. Somebody who said,
yeah.
whenever you go to a networking event, make sure that you have met at least three people. Someone should
Yes.
know that you were in the room.
Yes.
And so even when I don't want to, because there are times I go into a networking event because I have to be there, I have to be there on behalf of my company. I just want to get in and get out. And then that voice, no one knows you were here. I'm like, I made an appearance. They know who I am. No one knows you were here. And so I would just methodically go around the room, say a couple of things. And the thing is, I think people don't know what to say. And so they go around the room and they're just looking at people and eating or joining conversations and not saying anything. And one of the first things you really want to do is introduce yourself. Hey, how are you? Why are you here? Or how did you hear about this event? That's an easy icebreaker. If it's a horrible, if the weather is horrible, let's say it's snowy,
Yeah.
or if it's super hot, the weather is an easy thing to talk about. It's an icebreaker, right? Um, and so just start with maybe one of those questions, and the conversation will develop. And when you ask people why they are here or how they learned about the event, they'll probably tell you about their job. They'll probably tell you about their background. They'll probably tell you about maybe somebody who invited them to the event, and you could then follow up with a question there. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I might know this person, or I'm also an attorney, or I'm also in HR, or yeah, I heard about this event through this. How long have you been
Right.
part of this organization? To build that conversation. And like Tamika said, always writing a note of when you get that card, where you met that person, what you talked about. So when you follow up, it's something that they'll also remember, and they'll be more inclined to actually meet with you for coffee. The other thing I would say about meeting for coffee, if you're asking someone to meet you for coffee, pay for the coffee, right? Because that's just you showing appreciation for their time. More often than not, because I was unemployed at certain times and was networking a lot. Um, a lot of other, so, and they were mostly attorneys. They would pay for everything, which is great. So you might get a free coffee out of it. They're like, put your money away. We know you don't have much of it. And I would do the same thing. There are a lot of people who ask me to go out and network, and want to pick my brain or want some help in their job search. And I'll say, no, you don't have to pay for me. I'll pay for you because they're in the job market. And so it's just a way to pay it forward. But it's a great way to meet people and learn what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Because some of the folks that I met for to network after the event, they would tell me about what they do, and I'm like, yeah, nope, that's not an area that I'm interested in. And they would be very honest with me about what's happening in their industries. Last thing on networking that I want to share is do research on the person that you're going to meet. People want to hear about themselves. Um, it's nice to know that you've done your homework and you take the opportunity very seriously. For instance, one of my mentors now, a dear friend, when I first met her, I did a ton of research on her. She's like, you won't find a lot on me on the internet. I said, well, we'll see. I came with like a dossier. It was like, stacked up. And she's like, "Where did you get all that information?" I said, "I did my research. You're on the internet." And she asked me for the packet. She's like, can I have that? I really didn't know. So how you show up, think of it as even a mini interview, because then they'll either be impressed or have a thought about opportunities, or maybe want to recommend you to someone else because of how you presented yourself,
Right.
um, just for coffee.
Yeah. No, I thank you. I definitely agree with that.
Mhm.
Just on the last point that you clicked on, leveraging your network. I think a lot of us are a lot of times scared to ask for a favor. But the people that are successful in their career or in the industry are the ones that have asked, can you refer me to somebody? Do you know of a job? Do you know someone that's hiring? And so, back to that definition, when I talked about nepotism, we think as nepotism as being, this bad, term because, the way it's been used. But
Mhm.
really, we want to have nepotism in our network. Right. And, I will say, of course, we always want, the best qualified candidate, but in some networks, it really is hard to break through depending on, what you look like and, or where you're from, right? And so, I come from an industry that, is about 26% female, having the clean energy background, and 26%, 26% female, and the rest is, men. And then when you break it down into, race, it's, for African American females, it's even lower. It's like 8%, right? Not even 8%. I think that's like for all, like males and females. So, it's important that you ask in your network, can they refer you out? Do they know somebody? Because especially because when you read the statistics from Forbes that, 70% of hiring is done through word of mouth, right?
Mhm.
So, it's great, yes, we want everyone to have a great resume, but the fact is, if 70% of hiring is done through word of mouth, then we need to be out there, we need to be seen, we need to be introduced to others, and vice versa, being that provider for somebody else that may need help. Right. So I just think it's important to ask, when you are, searching or looking, it's just important to speak up and say, yes, I am job searching and
Mhm.
knowing how, to make the right phone calls and doing that and not being ashamed because, you don't have a job or, you're not where you think, you should be. It's just being able to really, use your network that way.
And then LinkedIn actually had a report. Actually, the CEO of LinkedIn stepped down from his position. And sorry, that I hear some stuff in the background. I think, yeah. So the CEO of LinkedIn stepped down from his position, and he's focusing his efforts on really and I can't remember the exact thing that he's doing, but he understands that because of your network, the opportunities that come to you will be different based on who you're connected to. So if you went to a university, if you worked in Fortune 500 companies, the likelihood that your network will work for you and you'll have higher paying jobs will increase. And he said that based on the data that they have through LinkedIn, that they see that a lot of their connections or members really have a segment. I'm trying to find a better word to explain this, but there's a lot of segregation almost in their networks because their networks look like them. And if people of color, if women are not connected to that network, then their likelihood of getting certain high paying jobs working in Fortune 500 companies is lower, right? So he literally stepped down from his role. He's now, still involved in LinkedIn, but he wants to focus his energies on supporting mixed networks, or helping people of color really build their networks in a way that will work for them. So the value of a network is so important. And people talk about nepotism like it's bad. There's some good to it, right? Because like Tamika shared, 70% of jobs are by word of mouth. That's how people get their jobs. Most of my opportunities, word of mouth. I rarely had to apply for a job because someone recommended me. In fact, the way I got into the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, which was my first job in HR, someone recommended me, someone connected me. So that's a really great point. And then the last topic we want to talk about here is just preparing for remote interviews. And then we want to give everyone who's here just to share their thoughts or to ask questions. And if we can help in any way, we'd be happy to do that. But just make sure, because a lot of companies are still hiring. We talked about Amazon. We talked about the Small Business Administration. Walmart is hiring, and again, not in store, not just warehouse, but a top down. Right, they're hiring across their organizations. But make sure you have good Wi-Fi access. Xfinity, AT&T, and some of the other wireless providers have discounts and different programs for people who are low income or may not be able to afford it, because they understand that during the transition to telework, a lot of schools were offline, or the students were offline and they didn't have access to laptops um, um, and other handheld devices so that they can learn online. And so there's been a lot of offerings around that. So this is something you definitely want to check. Um, and make sure that if you don't have a laptop, that maybe somebody will let you borrow it in your home, because you definitely don't want to share stuff and then get sick. But you can also use your handheld device. Almost everybody has a phone. Um, and make sure you're doing your research. So before the interview, that you know who you're interviewing with, you know about the company. The worst thing to do is to have an interview and not know who you're talking to and know nothing about the company, right? That tells the recruiter that you're really not that interested, or you're just trying to get a job. And while everybody's trying to get a job, they're more attracted to people who will do their homework, who have a sense of what the company or organization does, and are more inclined to move forward with that candidate. Another thing, make sure that you have that you're in an appropriate setting. So for this session and other webinars, I live in an apartment back home in Massachusetts. I had more space, but I have to find a wall. I've just seen that, right? That looks presentable, where I can just have record these types of sessions, have webinars, or if I need to do an interview online or on camera, that I have a setting that's not distracting, that is clean, and there are limited distractions. And there are always going to be distractions because we're at home. But to the extent that we can limit them, this is, I think, a good practice. Um, and then with your identification, just make sure you have a photocopy of your whether it's your passport, social security number, or card, or license, so that if you need to email it, not email it, but they have more secure, a lot of companies have secure ways of receiving information with personally identifiable data or information. So you can send it, like Bank of America has an Intralink um, um, platform that they use for sensitive information. And so just make sure you have that information available and that you can send it electronically, because a lot of companies are not able to bring people in for an interview, or not able to onboard in person, but they'll do it remotely. And they may ask for the hard copy later on. So you should have that as well. But after you send it, make sure you delete it from your own phone, so that if something happens to your phone, no one has your personally identifiable information. And the last one is always dress for success. Even if you're at home, just make sure you have a suit on, you have a professional attire on, so that there's no there really isn't an issue with your presentation, and it's not a distraction or reason why they would want to disqualify you for that position. So, Tamika?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good example. I'm going to talk fast because you're going to probably hear some background noise.
That's
Uh,
okay.
but I think a good example of that was, if anyone saw Will Reeve this week on Good Morning America, that is Superman's son, Christopher Reeve's son. He did an interview this week on the news, and he didn't have his camera position right. So the top, he had on his suit, but on the bottom, he says they're shorts, but they really look like underwear. And so if you see it, the interview, it looks like he has on his underwear with the suit, and you can see his legs all wide open and everything. And so that was, you can go Google it, but I think it's just important that you do dress for success, and because it's real, right? And you want to make sure that people will be able to see your suit and not with underwear. So that's just a good on-time example. Yes, agree with that.
Okay. How do you miss that? Okay. But you know what? I think there's another example of someone who was doing, and this is before the pandemic. They were on a major news station or media outlet, and they were doing an interview, and their son was who came in the room. I think everybody remembers that. But it was so nice because it was a laughable moment, and it was really a family moment, and it was really endearing. So, but always be prepared for whatever. So that's all we have. I want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to ask questions, or if we can help in any other way, feel free to do that. So you just have to unmute yourself. I've unmuted everybody. Any questions, or if you want to type in a question or in the chat, happy to answer a question if you have it. Eunice, Stephanie, do you guys have questions? And you're unmuted, so if you have a question, want to unmute yourself, feel free to do so.
Well, if there's no questions, or wait for questions to pop up, thank you so much, Jesse, for inviting me to be a guest today. I can be found on LinkedIn. I also can be found on Instagram. My company is Fruitful Vision Enterprises. You can find me on Instagram. You can also find me on my Facebook page. And I also have a YouTube channel that I put up the videos that I have done. I've put them up as a resource for others to use. So I just encourage you to visit that. Like I said, I did one last week with someone in the real estate industry, and I think that was very informative. So feel free to, use those other resources. And thank you so much just for inviting me, and for those that have joined us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So Eunice doesn't have any questions. He says thank you both. And Stephanie says she has no particular questions, but appreciates the conversation. No issues there, Stephanie. It's okay. We're also doing this tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central Time and 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So if this has helped you, please share it with your network and let them know that we're doing this. And at the top, we were able to help a little bit with one of the participants. But if we can help, we will help. That's the kind of people we are. And this is all free. As I mentioned before, I am the principal owner of a management consulting company. And the website is stcyrconsulting.com. If you have any questions, you could reach me at info@stcyrconsulting.com. I provide leadership development, management training, and coaching services. And I am on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I have a YouTube channel, but we're talking about my challenges in being shy. So, but it will probably be public at some point in time, and you'll be able to view this as well. But in the interim, you can see it right on Tamika's page. So
I
thank you.
welcome that. I welcome that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us, Eunice and Stephanie. And please share this with your network and let them know that we will have this again tomorrow. And if you would like the PowerPoint slide, and you could take notes or make notes for yourself, just email info@stcyrconsulting.com and I'll send it over to you. Okay? Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you.